Handing over to Margaret Lele, the CEO and Executive Secretary of the American Business Council. Hello, ma'am.
Yeah, hi. Thank you very much, Joseph. And welcome everyone to this media party. This is the last in the series of activities that we're having in 2020. So it's very interesting that we're ending our activities with the media. And it also tells how we value the media in the work that we do. The conversation that we're having today, which is intellectual property infringement, is an area that kind of cuts across in terms of its impact, not just to private sector, but also to government because of the way it impacts on the economy of the country, overall to innovation, so to individuals as well, and most especially to patient safety. So there are a couple of thoughts that will come out of this, and this is a Parley, so it means that we would like our voices to be heard as much as possible. And again, I would just say we have a great and fruitful deliberation. So over to you, Joseph.
Thank you very much, ma'am. So on the agenda, we'll have Chukwumwanya, the assistant editor of the Guardian newspaper, make a presentation on the role of the media in intellectual property reporting. I'll be sharing his presentation in a bit.
Joseph, I think it's important to, while we are trying to share this, to also acknowledge, the fact that Chukwumwanya has been done quite a lot in the industry. He's been one of the foremost health editors, and now even moving into science and technology in terms of what he does. And we really appreciate the fact that he's able to find time to join us today. And we have also a very wonderful moderator, Isioma Idigbe, who is an IP lawyer and very seasoned one at that. So I think it's important that we share this as we move on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, for noting that. Please, I want to emphasize that we switch off our videos if you're not on the panel. Please do that. Thank you. So over to you, sir. Mr. Chukwumwanya. The presentation is up. Hello, sir. Can you hear us?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello? Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can. Yes.
Okay. Just like I said, my name is Chukwumwanya, and my job is very simple. I'm speaking on the role of the media on issues around intellectual property infringement in the pharma space. Basically, we have to start looking at, what is the media? Media is like the platform for communication, to store information and data. It's a component of the mass media communication industry, just as the print media, publishing, the news media, photography, cinema, broadcasting, and advertising. Basically, the media, we also talk about the issue of newspapers, radio, and television. And most recently, not recently, the issue of the World Wide Web, the internet, has brought another dimension to the media. So now you talk about the print media, the broadcast media, the new media, basically digital media. So there are a lot of issues, but basically the media, what the media does is to communicate, to transfer information, to educate people, to bring awareness on issues. But there are issues that are coming up in terms of what the media does. You don't talk about the issue of plagiarism and the issue of intellectual property rights. These are violations that have come up and concerns that plague institutions now. So ask ourselves, what is intellectual property? Basically, it's a category of property that includes intangible creations of human intellect. There are many types of intellectual property, and some countries recognize more than others. The well-known types are the copyrights, patents, trademarks, and trade secrets. So these are the issues we will be discussing. The main purpose of intellectual property law is to encourage creation of wide range of intellectual goods. Economic-wise, so many countries, like the top 10 countries of the world, put side by side. They're also the countries that enforce intellectual properties, a lot of their goods. So that's why they are so rich. That's why they are so prosperous. Okay. Next slide. Then the issue of plagiarism. So this one applies more to us in the media, but it's a big issue too. Let's move on. Then let's go to the issue of IPR violation, intellectual property rights. It has become a big issue now. People exploit people's works. They transgress boundaries of legal protection. IPR violation is an unauthorized use of materials protected by IPR law in a manner that violates original copyright owners' exclusive rights to reproduce or build upon the copyright work. Just like I said, the two big issues here now, the issues of plagiarism and the issue of intellectual property rights violations, they have become a serious concern for many institutions and organizations. The revolutionary development of the web presents numerous opportunities for such infringements to become even more widespread. The situation creates the risk for introducing a culture of mediocrity. Basically now, so the question now will be the role of the media in IPR reporting. Because of the advances that we've seen in recent times, especially through the internet, improved communication access to information, the media play an important role in society as a source of information and also as a watchdog, as a scrutinizer. Like we call the media the fourth estate of the realm. It's the media that makes organizations, make the government, make the private sector to do what they are supposed to do. So the media is the watchdog, and that's the role the media plays. That we are the fourth estate of the realm. Besides the executive, the judiciary, the legislature, then you have the media. Then, according to the report by the Peace and Democratic Society on the role of the media and communication, mass media and other forms of communication technology, they have an enormous influence in helping shape public opinion and aligning sentiment. The role of the media on issues, not just on issues of IPR, on so many issues. The media shapes people's opinion. The media brings to the fore the issues. The media is critical of issues, educates people, bring awareness, make people do what they are supposed to do. Like hold the government accountable, hold the legislature accountable, hold the regulatory agencies accountable. Doing this through newspapers, TV, radio, and these days now, the digital media, they're all over the place. Then, the next slide. Still on the role of the media, they will talk about the issue of accountability. You remember the issue of the palliatives, the issue of the funds that were brought in to help during the COVID-19. The media tries best, even with civil society organizations, to hold the government and other others accountable as regards to the distribution and the money that were contributed to really bring relief to the Nigerian people. And we cannot forget the role they played during the recent EndSARS, the issue of EndSARS, even the COVID-19 in terms of education and making people to know why they should wear face masks, making people to know why they should wash their hands and things like that. Then the issue of the internet, just like we said, is the internet that has expanded the scope and has made the issue of plagiarism, the issue of violation, infringements on IPR become a big issue in recent times. Sorry, can you hear me? All right. So we now talk about the impact of IPR infringement on patients. Basically, the things that come to your mind, issue of okay, the issue of counterfeiting, the issue of piracy, the issue of smuggling. According to a paper by PricewaterhouseCoopers titled "The Impact of Intellectual Property Infringement on Businesses and the Nigerian Economy," data has shown a strong correlation between strong intellectual property rights and economic development. Strong IPR rights create an enabling environment for the innovation necessary for economic stimulation. Unfortunately, Nigeria is home to one of the weakest intellectual property protection regimes, which hampers growth prospects of our already weak economy. IP violation hinders economic growth by discouraging investment, decreasing innovation, discouraging research and development, diminishing financial benefits from creation, and may pose harm to consumers. You ask yourself, just like I said, the impact of IP infringement on patients, counterfeiting, fake drugs, substandard products. These several researches have shown that these impacts on the patients, even beyond the issue of impacting on the health. We talk about the issue of impacting on the economy in terms of even the patient having access to these products, in terms of even the cost. It affects the cost because of the violations. Over the years, Nigeria has become a target destination and transit route for counterfeit and pirated goods. Foreign and local traders flood the market with cheap substandard fakes, while local manufacturers illegally imitate products of established brands. Reasons for the widespread proliferation include informal structure of the economy, corruption, outdated legislation, weak policy, and enforcement mechanisms, and lack of proper awareness on the dangers of consuming substandard and counterfeit products. Then, Nigeria has emerged as a hotspot for manufacture and trade of fake drugs. Remember the issue of NAFDAC from the times of Professor Dora Akunyele, may her soul rest in peace. How she tried to fight faking and counterfeiting and the issues around it, how counterfeiting and faking of drugs and food products has led to a lot of sudden deaths, has led to a lot of complications. Even some studies have associated the issue of substandard food products and drugs to the rise in kidney problem, to the rise in complicated medical cases, to the rise in misdiagnosis and other diagnosis, because they also fake all these laboratory reagents and a lot of things are involved in the medics. So the proliferation of fake and counterfeit medicine has the detrimental effect on the economy too and the society. That way to affect the patient, because the patient is a human being. The patient is a Nigerian. The patient is a man. The patient is a woman. The patient is a boy or a girl. Nigeria is estimated to lose about 200 billion annually to counterfeit medicines, excluding substandard drugs. The market survey by Pfizer found that 40% of Pfizer medicines in Nigeria are sourced from illicit parallel importation, a form of counterfeiting. A 2001 WHO study found that about 64% of antimalarial drugs in Nigeria were fake. The counterfeit and substandard drug distribution network is so expensive that over 50% of drugs, food, and drinks sold in open markets are counterfeit. These markets serve most Nigerians, whose low disposable income pushes safer pharmacies and in turn drugs out of reach. Number of deaths, issue of mortality. This has led to a lot of preventable deaths that are linked to the consumption of fake medicines. And it is believed that enforcement is believed that if intellectual property rights are well observed and protected, a lot of lives will be saved from the damage caused by counterfeiting, piracy, pirating, food and drug products, we will help. Then, okay, sorry, where was I? Okay. Okay, well, let's go to the issue of best practices. Okay, no, let's go back, sorry. Yeah, okay. Yeah, according to the PricewaterhouseCoopers report, the legislation that most significantly impacts the war against fake drugs are the counterfeit and the fake drugs, and also processed foods of, like all the laws of NAFTA that establish the major administrative body in the fight against fake drugs. So all these acts, NAFTA has been fighting over the years, to bring down the issue of counterfeiting and faking, especially of drugs and food products. But the report concluded, intellectual property infringement has been detrimental to the Nigerian economy in many ways. It has kept Nigeria from attaining its full economic potential and has put lives at risk. To tackle the national IP infringement, the government should address corruption, inadequate funding, strengthen IP legislation, and foster collaboration among government agencies. Further, the government should launch an awareness campaign to educate the public on dangers of IP infringement to society and their role in the fight against IP infringement. That's intellectual property. Then another issue is the issue of the best practices. Best practices also, not just by the media, by the regulatory agencies, best practices by the civil society organizations, best practices by the stakeholders. The media should work closely with the National Orientation Agency, Standard Organizations of Nigeria, NAFDAC, the Consumer Protection Council of Nigeria, the Nigeria Copyright Commission, the African Intellectual Property Group, and the Intellectual Property Law Association of Nigeria, and so many other relevant groups. The International Chambers of Commerce Publication, through the Business Action to Stop Counterfeiting and Piracy, BASCAP, on promoting and protecting intellectual property in Nigeria, highlights the serious consequences of the increase in counterfeiting, piracy, and smuggling in Nigeria. The results of the report reveal that Nigeria has increasingly become a target destination and significant transit route for counterfeit and pirated products. The report calls for more government attention to these issues at national, state, and local level. The report's comprehensive recommendations range from legal reforms to technical assistance and capacity building measures, channels for international cooperation, and tools for strengthening enforcement practices. The report was released on July 15, 2015 during the ANADAS workshop entitled The Dynamic Role of Intellectual Property in Promoting Innovation and Economic Development in Emerging Markets in Lagos, Nigeria. The report received valuable input, support, and endorsement from ICC Nigeria, including key partners like NAFDAC, the African Intellectual Property Group, and the Intellectual Property Law Association of Nigeria. They make recommendations, the key ones, legislative recommendations, that need to improve and expedite civil judicial enforcement procedures, strengthen IP legislation and ratify IP international agreements, that need to improve action against internet infringements, improve border enforcement, address deficiencies in criminal procedures. Then on the issue of policy recommendations, that need to establish an interagency approach and enhance collaboration between Nigerian regulatory agencies administering and enforcing IP rights. Establish an interagency approach with private sector coordination. Expand IP-related administrative and technical capacity building. Increase public and political awareness of counterfeiting and piracy and associated economic and social harms. According to another report titled Nigeria, Strengthening Intellectual Property Rights and Protection in Nigeria, Nigeria needs to develop a national policy on intellectual property as a matter of urgency. From the experiences of China and India and the advanced countries of the world, such as the US, no nation can consciously and seamlessly develop its IP without first setting up and vigorously propagating a national policy framework that will spell out in clear terms the overall IP goal of the nation and launch time-based policy trust and short, medium, and long-term development goals. I'm running up. Effectively, when put in place, the proposed Nigerian IP policy, NIPP, will define what we want to achieve in our collective national talents, cultures, and technologies, and will be a mirror that reflects for other countries in the international community that what direction our industrial and creative industries are headed, and hence the kind of international conventions or treaties Nigeria will naturally be ready to ratify. The report recommends that a holistic reform of the country's IP sector immediately commenced with focus on attaining the following. 1. Clearly defined policy direction to be published in the National Official Gazette. 2. Integration of the developed national policy on intellectual property into national consciousness through vigorous public awareness campaigns to be championed by the National Orientation Agency and the media. Incorporation of the NIPP, that's national policy, into school curricula from the senior secondary school level to the higher institutions of learning. 4. Automation of the systems in all IP registration offices and their harmonization with the platforms of all regulatory bodies for trade, business, and investments in Nigeria, including but not limited to the Corporate Affairs Commission, Copyright Commission, Patents and Designs Registry, the Trademark Registry, SOM, National Office for Technology Acquisition and Promotion, Nigeria, that's NOTA, Central Bank of Nigeria, Nigeria Customs Service, Federal Inland Revenue Service, and NAFDAC. This will have the effect of creating a common database for these bodies. In like manner, it is also suggested that NOTA and NIDA should be merged, while the various laws constituting the IP framework should be revised to ensure that areas of overlap are addressed and that they complement one another rather than contradict or intrude into the purview of one another. Number 5, financial autonomy for, I'm writing up, financial autonomy for law enforcement agencies and the judiciary with adequate staff training in latest technology for both reforms of old IP laws and enactment of new ones in line with modern bilateral and multilateral treaties, such as the trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights, that TRIPS agreement. Finally, further amendment of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, that's 1999 Constitution, as amended, to create constitutionally recognized specialized IP courts to handle IP-related matters. Competent legal practitioners skilled and experienced in IP law should be appointed both from the bar, the bench, and the academia to sit at the specialized IP courts. Then basically, we talk about the issue for the role of the media, the best practices, the issue of training and retraining of journalists on IPR reporting. The media cannot do its role as the watchdog, as the scrutinizer, when it's not trained and retrained. The media cannot effectively function to alert the regulatory agencies, the private sector, the government, or hold them accountable if they don't have the capacity. I'm not just talking about the editors, even the reporters, to be able to know the issues around IPR, to be able to know how to approach it. This will lead to more editorials, more opinion pieces, more investigative journalism that will expose violations, that will make the regulatory agencies to do their work and hold them accountable. Basically, this is the role of the media. On the final note, I insist that the media needs support to be able to play its role in terms of its role in the reporting, its role on the impact of IP infringement confessions, and its role on best practices on IP reporting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah.
I'll be handing over, we'll moving straight to the panel session where we'll have, we're moderated by Alexis Sioma Idigbe, a senior associate from Punuka Solicitors and Attorneys. Hi, Isioma.
Hi, Joseph. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here with us this morning. And thank you to all my learned and non-learned but very experienced panelists who will be here with us. I would start by just giving some background into some of our panelists who will be joining us this morning and participating in our discussion this morning. This morning, we're going to be talking about, This morning, we're going to be talking about, perspectives. We're going to be talking about perspectives on the African continent free trade area and the impact of intellectual property on the pharmaceutical space. And we'll be looking at some of the outlook and expectations that we have from that interaction. So you can see on screen the profiles of some of our panelists today. So we have speaking with us on the panel, Mr. Otu Ekong Okoyen. I'm so sorry if I have mispronounced your name, sir. Mr. Otu leads the brand protection, employment, and global mobility practices at the firm of Olajide Oyewole LLP, which is a leading commercial law firm in Nigeria here. He also has significant experience in intellectual property matters, specifically in patents and design. He's also experienced in intellectual property infringement and employment-related issues as regards litigation, and handles disputes in both the Federal High Court, the National Industrial Court of Nigeria, the Court of Appeal, and the Apex Court, which is the Supreme Court of Nigeria. He routinely advises startup and established companies on intellectual property ownership and exploitation, brand protection, consumer protection, employment-related matters, and similar claims and disputes. His employment and global mobility advice is especially sought by foreign entities that are seeking to establish local operations or restructure existing operations and indigenous businesses. He's been identified as a rising star in the Nigerian market by the World Trademark Review 2000 for the years 2020 and 2021 respectively. He's currently concluding his second term as the General Secretary of the Intellectual Property Law Association of Nigeria. Thank you so much, Mr. Okoyen, for being with us this morning. Also with us today, speaking on the panel, is Mr. Chukwuemeka Obaka. Mr. Chukwuemeka Obaka is a Mandela Washington Fellow and is a university scholar and registered clinical pharmacist. His teaching and research interests in pharmacy practice, pharmacy education, antimicrobial stewardship, and supply chain management. He's the lead researcher of the Pharmacy Practice Research Group at the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, and has won several research and conference travel grants. He's also a consultant in pharma and health supply chain management, and added to his growing experience as certifications from MIT and self-facilitated trainings with Kune Foundation and ISCEA. Chukwuemeka is a mentor to a large and dynamic group of current and former undergraduate pharmacy students and runs a non-profit, non-governmental youth leadership group, the P Extra Academy. Thank you so much, Mr. Obaka, for being with us this morning, and thank you for your earlier presentation. So we'll really just get right into the conversation today. Oh, I'd forgotten to introduce myself. My name is Isioma Idigbe. I'm a senior associate and also the head of the intellectual property, media, and entertainment law practice at a law firm, Punuka Attorneys and Solicitors here in Nigeria. If I won't call myself a fairly new wig, maybe I'm hitting into moderate wigs, but I've had quite a lot of experience in intellectual property, ranging from media and entertainment sector all the way up to the pharmaceutical sector. And my firm is very much involved in both litigious and non-litigious advisory and dispute resolution practices. So that's just a little bit of information about me. So I'll get right into the questions because we don't have a lot of time, and as you can see from the profiles of our speakers here today, these are very, very busy and important people in the intellectual property space. So I'll start with Mr. Obaka. Protecting innovation in the pharma sector is the new normal and beyond. As a consultant in the pharmaceutical space and in the health supply chain, kindly share with us the innovations from the pharma industry in Nigeria and how they are able to protect their innovations, especially during COVID. I mean, obviously, supply chain issues are going to become very relevant now as the COVID vaccine is being rolled out. You know, it requires certain things like cold temperatures, and we're in a very hot country with unstable power. So from your perspective, taking all this background into consideration, how are we protecting innovation in the pharmaceutical sector, and are we ready in Nigeria to deal with the new normal in the pharma sector, particularly as regards supply chain management?
All right, thank you, Alex. I hope you can hear me.
I can hear you perfectly.
All right, and thank you very much. Without wasting so much time, I'll just get into it. What are the innovations? And I know quite a lot of persons want to find out what are the innovations in pharmacy. And probably towards the end of the speech, I'll look into innovations as regards the COVID pandemic. Let's first and foremost divide pharmacy into different supply chain aspects. The one that most of us are very conversant with is the kind of care we receive, either the community pharmacy or the hospital. Now, most times the innovation in that angle is moving into what we call patient-centric information, where patient data is now becoming fully automated and going into electronic data recording. Now, why has that become all of a sudden a new innovation? Now sorry, am I sharing this? Okay. Why is it now a new innovation? It's becoming very important because science has understood that patients have to be looked at as an entity. A patient is different from the other. A husband is different from their wife. A mother is different from her daughter. You look at it from a pharmacogenomic angle. So what we in Nigeria have started to do, obviously we are playing catch up, is that we've understood that it is important to get patient data. When I mean patient data, I'm talking of clinical data, demographic data, drug history data, all the data around the patient that can influence healthcare into an electronic media. And it is shared across all platforms of hospital care that the patient will come in contact with. Whether it's going to come with the triage, whether it's going to come at the community pharmacy, whether it's going to come at the hospital, whether it's going to come during surgery. It is important, but you know what we have in Nigeria here is where people just go to the hospital, he sees this doctor, probably abandons that doctor and goes to the other doctor, and this other doctor does not have the visibility into that patient's particular record or history of his record. So that is a part of community and hospital pharmacy that is gaining serious traction, and I can tell you places like Lagos, Abuja, and Port Harcourt are already having that conglomeration of hospitals and community pharmacies and all health facilities coming out as a group and sharing data within themselves, patient data that has also helped patient care to become much easier to make. Then next is this issue around drug distribution. Of course, it's something I'm also going to talk about much later. Drug distribution in Nigeria is a little bit very chaotic. When I mean distribution, getting it to the patient, getting the access to what we call the last mile. Now, the last mile could be exactly where your patient comes to seek medications, just like I mentioned earlier, the community pharmacy or the hospitals. And because of this, I'm sure most of us are very familiar with drugs being out of stock. Hospitals are never having enough drugs. And most of the times when patients come to pay for those drugs, it's either they become very exorbitant or patients even cannot even reach to them actually. So one innovation that is currently catching the buzz now in the pharma distribution sector is where you now have third-party persons come together and bring hospitals together as a pool. Of course, still again with the patient-centric data where they can share data. And those hospitals needn't keep medications again because obviously they cannot afford all medications. But this central pool has the ability to connect hospitals and their patients and their community pharmacies on real time. It's mostly an internet-based platform that they can provide, so that these patients have access. Because the beautiful thing about healthcare is access. And when patients have access, they have access to the points of care where these drugs are very much available. And at the end of the day, the middleman, the third party involved in this, is just like Jumia, just simply a platform that allows this interconnectivity and helps those hospitals and those community pharmacies source medicines. So you have one person supplying for all, not an all going for all supplies. And that has obviously done what? Reduced waste. And waste is something we do not take into consideration, we do not tolerate in the healthcare space. And also, something that is also mentioned, something Chukuma also mentioned, these buzz around internet hospital and internet pharmacy. That is becoming, people are getting drugs on the internet, people are getting healthcare on the internet. These are not regulated, but it's an innovation per se, but it's something we hope that laws and policies regarding regulating such care, especially in the fact that it can easily be abused. It can easily really be abused. But would definitely also call it an innovation. It was just for us to catch up with it and sanitize the system. But looking beyond the supply chain, something that is also very important is innovations in the universities and in institutes and laboratories. Not to sound too technical, but I would say that in the pharmaceutical academic institutes, most of the innovations are headed towards medicines technology. To put it better, how drugs, tablets, syrups, and co can be delivered to patients much more at the right doses. Just to give you an example, whenever a patient takes the medicines, the pharmacist and the physician is worried about one thing. Is that medicine he's taking orally going to be that same medicine as envisaged to reach his body and eventually act? Now, because we know in science that doesn't happen, because the human body is always looking out for ways to kill or to denature medicines, there is this thing we now call organ-targeted technology, where people are now taking medicines that do not get degraded until they get to the site of action. Also, again, when you are taking medicines, the tablets you have, and these tablets we have, in as much as you hear paracetamol 500 milligrams, it doesn't mean that paracetamol and paracetamol alone is included in that tablet. There are other drug additives, what we call excipients, that bulk up that paracetamol and aid the paracetamol to be well distributed within the system. Now, of course, obviously with COVID, immediately COVID hit, there was a huge reduction in importation of medicines. And apart from active ingredients like that's paracetamol, these other additives are also not fully produced in Nigeria. Now, what research has really driven, and it even came up in the discourse immediately after the COVID hit, is that locally sourced and quality assured excipients need to become available. And this is where research kicked in Nigeria into overdrive. And a lot of these excipients are already flooding, let me say, the bench space, because they have not started flooding the market space. And that is where this issue of patents and this IP we are talking about would come in. Then lastly, things around the nanotechnology. But I would not, nanomedicines and nanotechnology, these are still at the bench innovations. They have not caught up speed. When I mean caught up speed with practices, nobody has come to fund it and say, let me take this up and let it be marketable. But an institute I want to end with in regards to innovation, which I must state in the pharmaceutical space, is the NIPRID, that is the Institute of Pharmaceutical Research and Development. NIPRID has successfully marketed, produced innovative drugs, marketed these drugs, and it's for use in the public space. Quite a number of drugs, but of note is the drug that is used for sickle cell anemia. It was a game changer, because we never had a drug, even in the international space, for treating sickle cell anemia. And this drug has gone through trials. But one thing I want to pick out as a plus for what NIPRID is. NIPRID is an institute which brings in researchers as a hub. And that we found out has moved innovation much faster. What we do in research, mostly in academia, is we work in silos. And these are the things we say, these things should be stopped. This silo research and innovation should stop. But when we found out you come together, and of course, obviously, we know that NIPRID is in Abuja, it's near the seat of power, and patenting and getting intellectual property seems easier for them as compared to those who work in silos in the institute. So these are some of the advantages they have, and it's something they've really touted and we think should also be encouraged. But how have these innovations, no matter how small, no matter how non-marketed yet they have been, how have we been able to protect them? It will shock you. We've protected them by not even talking about it. That's the first thing. It sounds funny, but we've never talked about it. You know, initially in research, what we did was we kept publishing. What we now found out, no matter when you publish your innovation, you would find out your idea has already been, let me use the word, cascaded in developed countries. And all of a sudden, in fact, sometimes there's no recourse to your regard to your citation to you. They redo the science, and little do you know that your work is what probably produced a drug that came back to Nigeria. So what scientists have started doing in Nigeria, they don't even want to talk about it anymore. They just want to keep it to themselves. Again, because most people would, in the Nigerian space, would not pay for that research, that idea, that pattern, that idea you have invented, that invention you have made. But I would still give credit to NOTAP, that is the National Office on Technological Acquisition and Promotion. What they have done is they brought offices into the university, sort of to bridge the gap, to make patenting much closer to the university. But I must also confess that while a few people have started to take up the NOTAP idea of patenting, there's still a lot of mistrust. And that is where NOTAP has to also come in. It's not just opening offices, but it's consistently engaging people, engaging researchers that, yes, of course, when you patent this medicine with us, we are able to enforce the laws that are patented. And that's another issue entirely, which I know my legal expert is also going to talk about that. So, but generally, we want us to have this at the back of our mind, and more needs to be done. The National Association of the Industrial Pharmacy mentioned that there needs to be a national policy on aligning industry and technology, aligning manufacturing and research. There needs to be a policy. There is no policy that ties us. We still work in silos. Industry is moving on its own. Academia and research is moving on its own. There must be a table where all these institutes, commissions we have blown everywhere needs to come on the table, bring them together. And it's also important that we should remember that with this agreement, that is the African Continental Trade-Free Agreement, that when the borders are open, when the entire custom is open, the competition is going to be massive. To be very frank with you, Nigerian SME, pharma SME companies are not technologically driven. If you have competition coming with technology, we are going to be found wanting. So, and you know, technology increases responsiveness, because if you're technologically driven and your processes and your flow is technologically aided, it is easier for you to be responsive to market changing demands. We are not currently there. And with this agreement being ratified by Nigeria, or Nigeria being entering the ratification, if these borders are open, countries like South Africa and Egypt, which have started adopting technology in their pharma space, might tend to outwit us when the time comes. So that is why it is important that we leverage on the technological advantage. It gives a competitive advantage in the pharma space, especially with manufacturing. And I'm sure everybody will know that for every manufacturing, cost is most important. So
Thank you so much.
I will just stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm so glad that you've ended talking about the Africa Free Trade Continental Agreement, because that really segues into my next question. And I'm very happy that you talked about NAPRI and all of that. I was opportuned to be on a panel with NAPRI, and it was very impressive to sort of be exposed to the work that they are doing. And there are also, you know, several other government agencies that are doing a lot of research, even around COVID, that people don't know about. So I'll just quickly move to Mr. Ukoyan. And so looking at the Africa Continental Free Trade Area and some of the things that Mr. Obaka has talked about, competition, technology, how do you think that what the impact on intellectual property, particularly in the pharmaceutical sector, will be as a result of the ratification and implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement?
Thank you very much, Isioma. And I wish to express my appreciation to the American Business Council for the invitation to IPLAN. The short answer is that the impact will be massive. for the various reasons that have been discussed here already. I mean, looking at the key objectives of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement in the first place is to create a single liberalized market for goods and services and aid the movement of capital and persons throughout the region. Of course, there are very huge benefits from such an arrangement, including access to goods and services, access to pharmaceuticals, medicines, rare raw materials, key resources, skilled labor, you name it. I mean, the removal of trade barriers in itself, import duties as envisaged under the agreement will increase, like you rightly said, competition and provide opportunities to integrate on a global level, at least from that perspective. Now, there are some safeguards that have been put in place. For example, Article 23 of the Protocol on Trade in Goods under the African Continental Free Trade Agreement provides protection for what they call infant industries that have strategic importance on a national level. Now, it's important to note here that even the African Continental Free Trade Agreement itself does not contain a protocol for protection of IP as at today. Now, that protocol is something that is going to be discussed at the African Union Assembly and eventually adopted, hopefully early in the new year. Now, coming back to Nigeria, Nigeria has been described as the largest economy in Africa, the giant of Africa, and it has the range of issues that Mr. Chukwuemeka rightly pointed out. In addition to all those issues, we have challenges where other countries have capacity and skill to compete with us here in Nigeria in terms of production capacity, exports, logistics, you name it. There are even smaller countries out there with comparative advantage that can penetrate our market. So I think the question for me is, are we ready? In view of all of this, I would say no, but can we wait till we're ready? The answer, again, is no. What is important right now is that stakeholders must begin to learn to adapt to the new form of competition that is created under the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement and position themselves to take advantage of the new market one way or the other, which is about to be opened up. Now, as a result of unrestricted trade, transshipments, parallel trade, and all these other issues that have been discussed, what are the things that I see happening in the new year or whenever the agreement officially kicks off in Nigeria? We will definitely have an influx of all manner of goods with questionable quality from African countries. I mean, a survey that was conducted in June last year showed that 21% of a drug called oxytocin, which is a hormone that is secreted at the base of the brain, was shown to be substandard. And this hormone is usually required by women at the point of childbirth. Now, that is a huge problem when you have influx of such commodities coming into Nigeria with our already existing issues. Now, it's not all doom and gloom, no. There's some good news. Under the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement itself, there are some anchored projects that are specifically targeted at key industries, including the pharmaceutical industry. And some of these protocols, so for example, the Pharma Initiative Project, it's directed at mobilizing PPPs, public-private partnerships, to pool procurement of pharmaceutical products and establish sustainable safeguards for quality assurance of medicines. So stakeholders need to key into all these anchored initiatives and policies and sort of take advantage of them. Now, aside from that, we have the obvious intellectual property issues that will arise. I mean, let's look at the fact that we don't even have a regional coordinated database of registered IP rights across the country, across the region. You have a repo on one hand that has a few member countries, and they don't really have a consensus on implementation. And then you have, on the other hand, OAPI, that is about 17 French-speaking African countries that have some measure of protection, simultaneous protection in that region only. What happens to the rest of Africa? Look at South Africa, who is neither a member of ARIPO or OAPI. Look at Nigeria. Even our own local laws have their own issues. So I foresee a significant number of IP issues arising, primarily with trademarks, and you can imagine a situation where existing trademarks in other member countries are similar or identical to those that are registered or used locally. Now, coupled with the absence of a database, obviously we're going to have issues with challenging trademark ownership, priority of rights, and so on and so forth. In addition to counterfeits and smuggling that was mentioned earlier. So what then do we need to do? Sorry, I can hear some feedback there.
Sorry, if your mic is on and you're not speaking, could you please keep yourself muted? Thank you so much. Sorry about that, please, Mr.
Okay, so thank you. So to take full advantage of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, what we need to do at home is to build from the ground up. And like the first two speakers rightly pointed out, we need to establish policies that will address this fragmented framework for IP protection in Nigeria and get a comprehensive national IP policy and strategy. That is the only way. Otherwise, what we would have would be pockets of activity here and there. Now, I can tell you for a fact that in the last 12 months or thereabout, there have been strategic discussions among the leadership of the various MDAs in Nigeria, specifically towards securing their buy-in on the one hand, and then facilitating their cooperation towards this so-called IP policy and strategy. So far, the Honorable Minister for Industry, Trade and Investments, the Honorable Minister for Justice, the Honorable Ministers for Foreign Affairs, Science and Technology, Education, the Office of the Secretary of Government, and most recently, the Office of the Vice President have registered their full support for an IP strategy. So what do we need to do? I think in the short term, we need to have an organized, which is a priority for IPLAN, by the way, a national stakeholders forum. Stakeholders will come together, including the media, to discuss and thrash these issues out and hopefully develop a framework that we can build upon to establish this IP policy that is urgently needed, particularly now that we are looking at implementing the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. And once we have that in place, then we can begin to implement as we need to, i.e. by improving our laws, like Mr. Chukwuemeka said. I mean, we have the Merchandising Marks Act, that is what it was passed in 1916, before any of us on this platform was born. You know, we have the Trademarks Act itself that still today does not recognize service marks, even though in 2007, the then minister passed the gazettes that enabled people begin to file applications for protection of service marks. And yet, still today, those applications are accepted, certificates are issued by the Trademark Registry, but the validity of those registrations remain in doubt. In fact, there's a case in court today challenging that entire process. So these are some of the issues that hopefully we would need to address going forward, such that we can be better positioned as a country to take advantage of the free trade agreements once it kicks in.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ukoyen. I will go back to you, Mr. Obaka, here, because I think we sort of landed on a very interesting point, speaking about the need for an IP policy. And I know I've been at several forums. It's been a hot discussion this year about the need for an IP policy. It's been a big discussion at the NESG. It's been a big discussion in several places, on several platforms.
Sorry, can you start again? I mistakenly left the meeting instead of unmuting.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So I haven't asked the question yet. I was just laying the foundation for the question. talking because Mr. Okoye again ended on a very good point, talking about the need for an IP policy as a strategy to plug the holes, to deal with some of the issues that we foresee would happen as a result of the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. So from your perspective, if we are visioning an IP policy in Nigeria, what are the critical issues that we need to address? I know, for example, that there are several funds that are now available to pharmaceutical industry, but the question is, has that been effective? What needs to be done to make the use of those funds effective? I remember sitting on a panel with NAPRI, and there was a discussion about those funds not prioritizing research, R&D. So from your perspective, what would be the key things from a research and development perspective, and as well as supply management perspective, that need to be considered when we're looking at the development of an IP policy for Nigeria?
Okay, just quickly, I know you highlighted the funds CBN had mentioned they released, or they had made available, not released because it's not been released. They had made available for research in COVID-related research. Let's lay some basics. First and foremost, to even run any level of COVID research, there are levels of high safety biosafety laboratories we need, which we actually do not have. So with these, research has many of us put in applications to run research, but one of the things we found out is that those researches were still rudimentary, and the world, as regards COVID research, has moved very faster, much faster than us. Yes, we could find local sources of vaccines or medications and co. But coming back to the issues of IP, now with CBN releasing such funds to boost research, and just like Utu mentioned, even while NOTAP is in the universities as it stands right now, people are not even putting in proposals that while the proposals are going on and they're making baby researches or baby findings or innovations, there is nothing regarding intellectual property protection in that already. And now, what does that do? What that in itself makes it a bit more difficult, that we will still go around the same cycle we have always been going through. You do research, you get funding, some funding for research, and when the research output comes out, it is not protected. You put it up in a publication, which of course is what we do as academics, and somebody picks it up from somewhere, and somebody else enjoys the benefit of that, and also brings back that knowledge in form of a drug or a vaccine back to Nigeria. So reiterating what Mr. Okunyan said all over again, there needs to be a coming together. There needs to be that meeting point where, as funds are released, as research is being done, to protect the inventions of people, researchers like us, there needs to be that meet point where the government sets up that system when, while NOTAP gives you the patent, immediately it becomes marketable. When patents sit on the table, it is liable to be abused. Let me use that word. It's liable to be abused. But when patents, I know in countries like in the United States, people wait for a particular innovation and they give it speedy patenting, just like the Pfizer vaccine, speedy patenting, and it goes direct. People are already seeking to benefit from that patent, and they are going to ready to pay for that patent. Now, when you do that, that in itself, government is involved. It helps in that enforcement of that law, because now a private sector is involved and it has bought off the right or paid for part of the rights and is ready to pay for that right. In that regard, everybody's eyes and ears are already fixed on that patent. So that's one of the things I think government should do. Bring everybody back to the table. With regards to this funds CBN has released for this research, as research innovations begin to pour in, set up that national policy, set up that midpoint where these inventions are protected and are marketable as fast as possible, not sitting on the table.
Thank you so much. So if I were to summarize it, you think an IP policy should really focus on improving enforcement of intellectual property rights and also improving route to market require a lot of conversations between not just those who are doing the research, but also those who are manufacturing, making that route to market a little bit smoother. So I'll go to Mr. Okoye. Following from Mr. Obaka's comments, how do you think, or I know you've sort of touched on them when you spoke previously, but just for a little bit more detail, what kind of steps do you think need to be taken and included in an IP policy that would strengthen our IP laws and improve our enforcement? And also, looking at this comment you made about route to market, again, from an IP law perspective, how do we improve the route to market? Because it's been quite interesting seeing different countries around the world as the research and pharmaceutical industry has sought to respond to COVID. It's been interesting to see IP policies in different countries be put, basically in play. And it's interesting to see, are there Nigerian equivalents? And if we're talking about a Nigerian IP policy, what do we need to do to be able to do just that?
Thank you again, Nishima. I would say that the basic, the foundation of the policy is to ensure that government recognizes the importance of intellectual property in the first place. And I'll tell you why that is absolutely critical, because if you look at what has transpired in the IP space over the last decade or even more, you will see that federal government has paid largely lip service to the development of IP. And I will just use the example of the copyright bill. Now, the copyright bill is a bill that was sponsored by, it's an executive bill. And a lot of work was put into that bill. During the life of the last administration, there was extensive industry engagement. There was extensive lobbying and discussions around the power brokers. And then that bill eventually died with the last administration. As we speak today, that bill has not been transmitted to the National Assembly for legislative action. You know how many years have already gone by. You know what the legislative process is. And there is a bicameral legislature we have before we can get the presidential assent. It's a long hurdle. And this was a bill that even the current vice president was involved in, So the government has to appreciate the importance of, and it talks about diversification of the economy. You cannot diversify the economy if you don't have these building blocks in place. So for me, it's two things. One, federal government must recognize the importance of IP and the role it plays in driving and boosting the economy, and how it will protect the rights of people when the free trade agreement is eventually implemented. That's on the one hand. And then you then have the structures to implement these laws. Look at the Nigerian Copyright Commission, for example. It has all sorts of problems. I don't need to mention them here. I'm sure you, Isioma, you are fully aware of the problems with all the other regulators. And it still boils down to the recognition of the importance of IP. So in the last 4 years, IPLAN clamored for the establishment of an industrial property commission that will administer all industrial property rights, patents, industrial designs, and plants and animal varieties, and so on and so forth. We prepared a bill. We got our hands on the bill. It was a private member bill. We had a retreat. We reviewed the bill. We met with the then chairman of the Committee for Commerce in Abuja, and he promised us that the bill would proceed to the third stage, which was the public hearing. That bill never went to the public hearing. In fact, we were requested to facilitate the public hearing by sponsoring the public hearing, and there was a budget for that already. So that just shows you the core problems that we have in recognizing and moving from the position where we simply pay lip service to actually moving things forward. So that's the thrust of whatever engagement it is we have across the sectors and with the federal government towards establishing the policy. And then we can, from there, move at least a step forward in terms of getting the right structure in place for implementation, getting the right provisions in the body of the law itself in place, and then all these things of distribution can be addressed, at a later stage. But the fundamental issue that must, I mean, look at the Trademark Act today. We don't have provisions for priority registrations. Why? Because it has simply not been domesticated. And they know, it's not like they don't know. When I attended, imagine in 2018, there was a public hearing on, there was a public hearing on a trademarks bill emanating from the Senate. Meanwhile, the House of Rep had a different bill altogether for the establishment of an industrial property. I attended both because I was pushing hard. And I spoke with the senators at the National Assembly. It's just unfortunate. I don't want to speak more than this, but I guess everybody understands my drift. But this is what we need to do. I would rest it there.
Thank you so much, Mr. Okoye. And I share your passion. You know, I do a lot of work in the media and entertainment space, so the copyright bill has been a major frustration. And a whole chunk of work I've done this year has been focused on trying to get that bill to the House. And even when we're talking about the bill, we're not even talking about the copyright levy, which is a source of revenue for the sector that is there and has never been implemented. So I mean, we can talk about so many, and I'm glad you brought up this point about there even to an extent being some policies and laws and regulations that are in place and are simply not moving into the stage of being implemented and activated. And now we have the AFCTA coming, and there's all this pressure, and we're not ready. We are not ready to deal with that. I'll go back to you, Mr. Obaka. We know that you also consult for the African Resource Center that aims to improve availability of medical and health products by and in relation to the movement of pharmaceutical products moving cross-border, especially in the manner in which it will do under the AFCTA. Can you share with us the Nigerian pharmaceutical supply chain system's readiness for this? And I would like you to put this in the context of COVID, because and I remember you talking about, you know, with the borders being shut down and the reduction of importation of products into Nigeria, it has driven research into, you know, what locally available alternatives to medicines. So taking all of this into consideration, we have this new law coming in, which means that, you know, all kinds of products, medical products, will be coming into our markets, you know, quite easily now. And we have COVID, you know, we have this COVID vaccine that needs to be rolled out into the market with very specific conditions. And we have limited patient information because the UK recently talked about allergic reactions and things like that. I mean, how ready is the Nigerian supply chain system for all these things that are all about to happen all at the same time? Sorry to be the bringer of doom and gloom.
I think I will still toe the line of Mr. Okoye. We are not ready. We are not ready. But I think there are signs that we're on the road to readiness. I'm not saying that we are ready, but there are some signs, and I'll talk about the signs maybe towards the end of my talk. But let's have some background. Nigerian pharmaceutical sector is the largest in West Africa. It feeds most of West Africa. Let's just get that into mind, because so that in itself, from the trade agreement, seems to be as if we are at an advantage, because we'll definitely be able. We are the big boys. We'll be able to suppress others. But get it that in as much as we are the largest, do you know that we still do not, as a Nigerian space, produce up to 1% of the generic medicines in the world? India produces 20%. India as a country, not as a continent. India produces larger than the entire continent on the basis of pharmaceutical volume. Now, you would surprise you also, like I said, 90% of the raw materials, what we call raw materials for making medicine, is imported, totally imported in Nigeria. Will that change when the agreement comes up? Now, going back to what Mr. Otu said, what is the whole objective of this agreement? Create a single market. Open up the customs. In fact, it says it wants to unify the customs. So we'll have probably one custom. And it says, yes, enhance global competitiveness and get a lot of people out of poverty. When Nigeria rejected it the first time, the PG man, of which the pharmaceutical manufacturing sector is also part and parcel. Rejected it when the president also echoed it that dumping was going to be a problem. Until date, the pharmaceutical sector still think, yes, we have gone and ratified. They still have that fear. And I said the fear comes up because they are not also technologically driven. They are not responsive. The fear of, maybe, let me use an example. Uganda produces, okay, let me just give a typical example. A Chinese consortium flies into Uganda, masked as a Ugandan organization of pharmaceutical sector, maybe have 1 or 2 Ugandan people as board members, fly in their technology into Uganda and produce paracetamol at 5 naira. China has that ability to do that. No matter how we compete in Nigeria, Nigeria today cannot produce paracetamol less than 15 naira. No company can do that. Then you ask, what is the difference? They will even produce it at 5 naira and lift it from Uganda to Nigeria, probably at 6 naira. And you keep wondering how and why. And now it brings us now to the fact that we are not yet ready. And really, the issue about intellectual property theft is also a bit shaky. It's something that the pharmaceutical space are also worried about. And that if they go into research, if they go and tap in the new inventions the researchers are making, the laws that are there, would it, like my friend mentioned, it says one is 1960, will it be enforced? That's the question. Or is it just buying the IP from researchers and then it goes to waste? Because your next door neighbor, I'm not talking of somebody from Seychelles that is going to cross the border, your next door production neighbor starts to steal that your technology or your invention and starts to produce medicines. But I will give it to government a little bit, and I will say that some things have been done with respect to now that COVID has shown us that imports can actually be shut off, and we need to look inwards. I will give some points to the federal government and the state government from a supply chain point of view. One of the things they are doing currently is to start setting up structures. Let me particularly praise Lagos State. I will praise that state, especially with their response to COVID. Lagos State was the first, and I still say the only, in real terms, that set up an emergency supply chain pharmaceutical distribution system. I think that's the only one. I don't know of any other one that did it, to the best of my knowledge. And they were very responsive. I keep using this word, responsiveness. One of the things these governments have done is they've started to increase supply chain capacity, human capacity. More people are getting training, more people are going for MIT training, more and more people are getting training in emergency supply chain. And most people are getting this training because if at all the vaccines begin to come, how ready are we going to be? Remember that COVID affected the supply chain of other medicines. People are talking so much about COVID. The impact of COVID affected reproductive health system. People are not going to collect their family planning products. There was a lot of wastages. The forecasting and all the whole quantification system went very bad. Nobody is talking about those ones. But COVID impacted. Now the question is, do we have capacity to be able to manage the direct effect of COVID and the indirect effect of COVID on the supply chain? So I am going to say that one of the things also we are going to be doing to get on that road of resilience, we need to start adopting new business models. We stop thinking traditional. We need to live traditional. If we open up the borders with the agreement, there will be so much influx and outflow. Who manages this data? How visible is this data? You need to have data visibility. We need to know which drug. If I take, for example, a drug, let me just keep using paracetamol. And this paracetamol claimed it was produced in Tanzania. I need to know the company in Tanzania. We can't just say it was produced in Tanzania, we have opened the border. We need to know that company, what are their practices, because it also ultimately what influences the health within us. So if you're going to have increased data visibility, you're going to have people that have data analytics skills. Do we have that, or are we planning to have that? Next, the pharmaceutical sector should start thinking of decentralization. We were too central in our production and manufacturing. That's why COVID hit us bad. Our pharmaceutical sector needs to start moving to Uganda, moving to South Africa, if the agreement open, and start having your manufacturing plants there. Once you do that, you reduce the issue around the cost. Yes, we said that custom is going to be open, but I really don't think custom would have as open. Yes, you may reduce duty. I think what the agreement will do, reduce duties and but not to allow free influx as that much. There needs to be some regulations also. Then also, like I also mentioned, research productivity also has to improve. But at the end of the day, the legal aspect of it, enforcement, I don't know whether my legal practitioner will correct me. upgrading our laws, upgrading our laws. It is very important. So enforcement is very important. And of course, at the end of the day, that unification of the sector, so as, like I said, avoid the two fears that we have for the pharmaceutical sector: the theft of intellectual property and dumping of cheap pharmaceutical medicines. Once we can do all these I mentioned and get the structures in place, we would avoid that, and the supply chain of essential medicines pre-COVID, post-COVID would be a thing that the system would have in place.
Thank you so much, Mr. Obaka. So I'm going to go into some of the questions that we're seeing in the chat box. And there's a question, what important topic do you believe we should be driving in 2021 on intellectual property? I'll take this to Mr. Okoye. What important topic do you think we should be talking about in 2021 as regards IP?
For me, it would have to be awareness. It would have to be awareness across the various sectors, and both at the private and the public sector. Without that awareness, we can make very little progress, if at all. You know, people have to appreciate what intellectual property means in actual and real terms. They need to understand how to protect, what is protectable, how to protect, how to avoid from plagiarism to outright counterfeiting. You know, that would be the first step. Once the awareness is in place, then we can make progress. You know, I always believe in starting small, but starting reasonably. That would definitely be my first step. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Mr. Obaka, do you have any additional comments?
Just to build on what Utu has said, from an academic point of view, we also need to, for me, I think enforcement is also very important. Yes, the laws are there. How do we begin to enforce? Like he said, start small, but we can pick up these COVID interventions that are coming in, innovations are coming in. And like I said, back it up. Government needs to be involved, like he said, involved and enforce these laws.
Thank you so much. And just to say, those from the media who are here, our media collaborators, please do use the chat box feature to ask your questions. You can also raise your hands. If you look down at the bottom, there's a hand raising emoji that sort of looks kind of like this. You can indicate that you would like to ask the question by clicking on that. I'm just taking a look at some of the questions. There's a question, is Nigeria a member of ARIPO? No, Nigeria is not a member of ARIPO. I believe Mr. Okoye had answered that when he was doing the panel. There's a question here. What exactly is the future of intellectual property in Nigeria in realistic terms, considering the mindset of the average Nigerian? I would say I think we sort of answered this question. But I don't know if Mr. Okoye, you want to take another crack at it from maybe a slightly different perspective.
I think there's a vibrant future. I mean, if you look at the leaps and bounds in the entertainment industry, in the technological industry, you see that there's a lot of potential. Yes, the law obviously does a lot of catch up, but yes, there's room for that catch up to occur. And I see a lot of potential because I see that Nigeria is blessed with a lot of innovative and creative people. And as long as that is in place, all we need to do is to set up the structures that will give them the incentive to continue to be creative. So yes, so there's a future for IP, a bright future at that for IP in Nigeria.
Mr. Obaka, would you like to take a crack at that question as well?
No, I think he said my mind.
Okay, so there's another question. What is the most effective way of avoiding dumping in Nigeria? Is it by enacting a law in Nigeria to address that? Again, I think this is to you, Mr. Okoye, and from a legal perspective, how do we avoid dumping? Do we need to enact an anti-dumping law? You know, this.
Okay, I think one of the very fundamental problems we have in this country is enforcement. I will tell you that Lagos State, for example, has a law that prohibits street hawking. Now, street hawking has been a route for piracy to thrive in Lagos. And you see them acting with impunity, but that law is actually in place, and nothing has ever been done to, one, address the fundamental issue, which is knowledge of the infringement that is going on, two, providing alternative businesses for these hawkers, and then three, getting them off the streets. So even if we establish that law, yes, we can establish a law, and a beautiful one. I was privileged to work on an IP policy for Kenya while I was on a committee on the International Trademark Association. And that was basically to set up an IP recorder with their customs. So in Kenya, what they're trying to do is you cannot import into Kenya without first recording that item and your ownership of the IP with customs, such that if there's an infringement within that territory, customs can pick it up. You've already set up a bond, which will pay for the expenses for seizure and destruction and prosecution. If we set up a similar structure in Nigeria, which, by the way, we've canvassed for in the past, we will still have issues with enforcement. And one of the things we are trying to do now, I've spoken about awareness, is also training. We need to train the relevant agencies on how to enforce these laws. Otherwise, we will just be wasting our time, unfortunately.
Thank you so much. Mr. Abaka, I don't know if you wanted to intervene in that question.
All right. With regards to dumping, I will look at it also from the pharmaceutical sector. And what exactly is this dumping that we are explaining, especially from the global trade perspective? We take an example. We sign the agreement comes into play. And let us say, for example, in Ghana, paracetamol is produced at 5 naira, but in Nigeria, paracetamol is produced at 15 naira. Now, in Ghana, while it's produced at 5 naira, Ghana sells paracetamol or sells it to their public at 10 naira. But when it crosses our border, instead of selling it at 10 naira, you sell it at the Nigerian price of 15 naira. What you have just done is you have dumped something that you had a competitive advantage of over in Nigeria at probably even 14 or 13 naira. Government will not want that because it is going to kill local SMEs. What has government been doing all this while to avoid dumping? It is using duties to benchmark it. They will charge duties so that 5 naira you produce in Ghana comes up to the same 15 naira, so that you will compete at the same rate with those in Nigeria. But with the free trade agreement, that's one of the things President Buhari mentioned, that dumping, the agreement does not say, because the agreement limits the amount of custom you pay. That's what the agreement says. But nobody has said why the amount of custom is being, the amount of custom duties being paid is lower. How do we benchmark the two types of products that are coming to avoid dumping? So that's one of the things I still think that Nigeria will still stick to its custom duties. That's what I think, that's typical of Nigeria, and may not honor that aspect of the agreement, because really you use custom duty globally. Custom duty is used to benchmark for dumping. That is what is being done.
Thank you so much. There's a question here, but I think we've answered it. So thank you, Timmy Tokwe. About, I see production and circulation of fake and substandard drugs as a great patent infringement issue in Nigeria. I want to know from the panel, is the major way to tackle this challenge? I know we've talked about this, and I know Mr. Okoye had talked about we need to know who the producers of drugs that are being imported into Nigeria are. So thank you so much, Mr. Okoye and Mr. Abaka, for your time today. I think I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, and I'm sure that the audience have. So Joseph, I will hand over to you, and thank you very much to the American Business Council for giving all of us an opportunity to discuss this very pressing issue. Thank you so much. Joseph, oh, am I supposed to continue? Okay. Looks as though I'm supposed to continue the program. Sorry, 1 second. Let me just pull up the agenda one more time. I believe there's supposed to be another session now on. Joseph, I don't know if you are still on the call.
Uh, I, I don't know if I can't see him, but
Okay.
I think the day is really. Can you see him now? Because I can't see him.
No, I'm looking at the
Yeah, agenda.
I'm looking at the agenda. I think what's next is supposed to be a presentation from IPLAN and HE1 on ideas on collaborating with stakeholders on IP reporting. So I guess it's be to call the IPLAN and HE1 representatives to please give their presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, I see that Joseph just joined again. Joseph, are you back on? Looks like he got out. And, are you back on, Joseph? We see that we have there's a gentleman whose hands are raised. Actually, Mr. Emily Scanty. I'm not sure if you called him, but his hands have been raised. I don't know if it's
Oh,
they still
sorry.
raised.
No.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
it's
No.
important at least tackle that, and then we move on to Joseph.
I don't think I have the ability to unmute him, so I would need someone in the back end. Okay, yes, he's been unmuted.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Good morning, Mr.
Can you hear me?
Scanty. Yes, good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Yes,
Yes.
it's actually Stephen Ubimago.
Pardon?
I say it's actually Stephen Ubimago.
Oh, sorry about that.
Stephen
Good morning.
Ubimago.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Ubimago.
Yeah, good morning.
Please go ahead.
Yes. Yes, I think Mr. Ubaka actually spoke about the issue of tardiness in terms of upgrading IP laws. He berated the condition of anachronisms in IP laws. He also tied it to the fact that laws seem not to move very fast in terms of reforms and stuff like that. But he was very careful as to say he doesn't want to talk much. He doesn't want to talk much, and he left it. He stopped short at elaborating on that issue. Can he be a little bit specific? Can he tell us a little bit what are the issues? Because I have been in an IP conference like this. I think about 6 years ago, or 5 years ago, and this same issue of tardiness and anachronism was raised. 5 years later, we're still dealing with the same issue. What is actually the problem? How come we cannot move fast enough, to deal with this issue of upgrading the IP laws? Because it does appear it's really not allowing innovations to move as fast as possible. Where can he be very specific in terms of clarifying on where the problem really lies? This is actually the issue I want to know.
Hello?
Hello?
Okay, yes, Emily, I think okay, it was Mr. Okuyen that mentioned that, why he said he wanted to stop at that point.
Yeah.
So you refer the question to him because he had some details. He said he didn't want to.
Okay. I think I was mixed.
He said when he was making reference to a particular copyright law that needed upgrading or so, and when they got to Senate, there were some issues, and he said he didn't want to deflect a lot of information in that regard. So I think, okay, Otu is here. So can you please tell me, are you willing to leave out that information?
Sorry, I was discussing with someone. Can you just, I'm sorry to take you back a bit. Can you just
I can go ahead again.
Go again, yeah.
Yes, no problem. Yes, I think I said 6 years ago, about or maybe like 5 years ago, I was in a conference of this nature, but it was an in-person conference, and it was an IP conference. And we dealt with the same issue of tardiness and anachronisms, anachronisms in terms of the fact that the IP laws are not moving as fast as possible in terms of reforms. So we're still dealing with IP laws of 1914. You know, early in the last century, we are in a different century altogether. But you know, innovations and changes and reforms in IP law seem not to be moving in steps with, you know, creative developments in our own space here.
Yeah.
So what is the issue? While you were talking, you stopped short at, you know, divulging more. You said the matter got to the Senate. You know, it practically died there. Can you clarify a little bit? Is the problem with is the problem at the heart of legislative, you know, lawmaking? Can you just clarify? I'm a little bit confused because I feel like how come that the people in authority seem not to know that these anachronisms are affecting, you know, the creative industry in Nigeria and whatnot?
Thank you for the question. I think I mentioned it earlier. At the end of the day, it boils down to legislative interest. If you look at every law that has been passed, there has been an interest group behind it. Look at the finance law, for example, or any other law for that matter, or the executive orders that were signed by the president in the course of the year. It's all about interest. I can tell you that the copyright bill had overwhelming support from the private sector and to a large extent the public sector. But was there sufficient legislative interest to get it passed into law? The question is a resounding no. That is the problem. And that is why we continue to canvass to campaign to let the government understand the importance of and the role of IP. I keep talking about the entertainment industry. If you know the contribution of the entertainment industry to the GDP of the country, you will wonder why, despite that contribution, there has been very limited progress in terms of law reform. And it's a fundamental problem. And it ties into what you've said, rightly so. So what we're doing now is to try and fortunately we have a vice president that is a technocrat and he understands the importance of IP. So we're routing, when I say we, I'm talking about IPLAN, we're routing our engagements through the office of the vice president, and hopefully we will get the kind of traction we need to get the reforms done within the lifetime of this current administration.
Can you Otherwise, hear me? Let me make another contribution. Can you hear me? Somebody has actually said that the problem sometimes is that we do not have solid infrastructure for lobbying in Nigeria. For example, in other parts of the world, in America, in Europe, you have what you call lobbyists who could interface with the lawmakers, you know, and make things happen in terms of legislative development. But that in Nigeria, we don't have this culture and infrastructure for lobbying. Do you share that idea?
I don't, and I don't because I know for a fact that there are huge companies in Nigeria that require and have put in a lot of pressure on governments. They have sponsored engagements with governments to move things forward. They have lobbied, but then again, we've still made very minimal progress. And let me give you a little bit of insight. The Industrial Property Commission Bill is a bill that is seeking to overhaul the current structure and establish a commission to administer various IP laws. You will not believe that bill had about 4 different versions at the National Assembly, at the House of Representatives, and there were 2 particular versions that were terrible. One version had provisions establishing the commission only, and the officers that would serve, the primary officers of the commission only. And then we had version B that had provisions establishing the commission and then substantive provisions on the law. Would you believe that the interest of government was tied to version A because of their interest? Their interest was only tied to the positions that would be occupied within the structure, not with the provisions
The commission
that were tied to the law. So at the end of the day, like I have said, and that was the version of the bill that moved up to the second reading for many years. I think second reading.
Yes, yes.
Exactly. Before the private sector, IPLAN got involved and started moving the other version that had the substantive provisions, and then we got to the position of the public hearing. So we have a lobbying process in place. We just don't have the political will, unfortunately, and we just don't have the political interest to do what is needed to be done to move things forward. I just have to be blunt and frank about
Now, finally, let me ask this question. So, what are in specific terms? What are the just in specific? I will just.
We'll have to round up. Sorry, we will take the question out of the call, but I just want to thank everyone for taking out their time to attend this wonderful session. I also want to thank our panelists and moderator, Sioma Idigbe, Utu Ukoye, and Mr. Waka. Thank you very much. I also want to thank Johnson & Johnson for sponsoring this wonderful session. Thank you everyone very much, and we'll share summary notes afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye.